All right, we're holding in Sefer Mishlei, the second half of chapter 23, Pasuk Yutet. In the second half of this chapter, he really will spend most of the time discussing the pitfalls of being a drunk. Nevertheless, there are some additional ideas, and even though he talks about being drunk, the real mashal, or the real message behind what he's saying is that there are quite a few ta'avot out there, desires that people have, tendencies, inclinations, and their common denominator is that they mislead a person into thinking that these ideas or that these habits are important, and the person can be sold to it. And when one is sold to his desires, to the ta'avot halev, then the mind does not function properly. He does not exercise full control over it. So even though the example being given many times will be wine, you could apply this to just about any other ta'ava, any other desire that could cause similar consequences. He begins by saying, Shma ata beni v'chacham v'asher b'derech libecha. You should listen, my son, and grow wise and walk in the way of your heart. Well, usually it is not a good idea to walk in the way of one's heart. So what is he saying here is that if you become a chacham, if you have studied Torah and you have filled your mind with chokhmah, then you will be able to walk in the ways of your heart, because your heart will not mislead you. In other words, you will have enough chokhmah that what will be guiding you all along is really your chokhmah, your sechel, and not your heart. So even your heart may desire something, it will not really be something which is not good for you, because the chokhmah is in charge, the chokhmah is in control, and therefore you have nothing to fear. So he advises us to become chachamim, to become knowledgeable in the Torah, so the Torah will guide us in life, and the Torah will guide us in making our decisions. Al tehi b'sovei yain. After he gave us this introduction of how important it is to know or to have, to possess the chokhmah, which we have discussed in the past many, many times, now he tells us, gives us an example of an individual who's not a very big chacham at all. He's the one that gets drunk, and he advises us as follows. Al tehi b'sovei yain b'zolelei basar lamo. Do not be among wine guzzlers, as he translates it, among gluttonous eaters of meat for themselves. As I explained in the beginning, there are various ta'avot. Don't be amongst those who overdo it, whether it's in wine or in meat. What is he saying? He's saying that it's not just those things that are forbidden to us that we have to keep away from. We have to also, for our own benefit, keep away from not overdoing something which is mutar. Just because something is mutar, permissible, doesn't mean it's a good thing to overdo it. Because when you abuse something, even if something is good, it eventually controls you. You get into the habit of it, and it's too good. It will be too good of a good thing is also not good. And meat and wine are examples of ta'avot that if one has the habit of guzzling, as he calls it, or allowing himself to eat as much as he wants from the meat, it will have very bad consequences for him. First of all, the consequences of the increase of ta'avot bring about, as we will see in the next verse, poverty and laziness, which we've discussed in the past, how a person who is very addicted to certain things, it's going to become expensive after a while for him to maintain this habit, this addiction. So if something is expensive, and people cannot kick the habit, then they spend the money, and when they don't have the money, they can come to steal the money from their own parents. And I don't think I'm telling you anything earth-shattering here, anything new. I'm sure you've heard of this, you've read it in the paper, what kids have come to because of an addiction, or what they have done, what they are capable of doing, because of this urge that they have. And that's what he says over here will happen. כי צובע וזולל יברש וקרעים תלביש נומה. For the guzzler and the glutton will become impoverished, they will become poor, and slumber will clothe you with tatters. Slumber, one who sleeps a lot, lazy, will clothe you with tatters. Tatters is just another way of describing one who has no clothes. All he has is rags. Because he's poor. He's impoverished. He has lost his money, or he has spent all the money in pursuing this addiction, this desire. And these are the immediate consequences of one who has no control over something as bad as wine or food. There are other examples, but as I said before, more or less they're all similar in the sense that if one becomes stuck in, or one has this habit, it will be very difficult for him to rid himself of this habit. Unless, of course, he has chokhmah. One who has chokhmah, then hopefully he will stay away from it. He will not allow himself to overdo something. Now he begins to tell us the benefits of having a father and mother, hearing their musar. We're dealing with young children, teenagers, and even older people. The tendency for those who are young is to believe that what they know is better, and they have a hard time accepting the musar of their father or of their mother. And Shlomo Melech advises us, you know what? One way for you to stay out of trouble is not only to learn chokhmah, which you already told us before, but also it is advisable to listen to what your father has to say. After all, this father or this mother cares about you. They really love you. And what they have to say to you is usually full of chokhmah. They're more experienced than you are. They are older than you. So he's giving us the tools, he's giving children and adults alike, the tools to stay out of trouble. Because on our own, we are biased, we have our ta'avot, we may not be able to see clearly between what is right from what is wrong, unless we have the chokhmah that guides us, or unless we have the teachers that show us, or unless we listen to our parents. And human nature is not so. Some kids are good kids, but some kids are rebellious kids. So he says, you want to stay out of trouble, you want to stay on the right track, acquire chokhmah, and listen to your parents. And even though it is true that parents sometimes may say something which is not accurate, which is not according to the Torah, we're not talking about those kind of situations. Obviously, if the parent himself does not have the chokhmah, for whatever reason, that he cannot give advice in every area. He can give advice perhaps in business matters, but not necessarily in other areas. So, but generally speaking, we're talking about parents who are God-fearing, who want to give over the best education to their children. Shema la'avicha zeh yiladecha. He gave birth to you. Listen to your father, the one who begot you. And do not despise your mother when she has grown old. Ve'al tavuz ki zakena imecha. So we're talking about a situation where one may lose respect, perhaps, for his mother or father, for whatever reason, because they got old, they don't know, he thinks he knows better. And Shlomo Melech says it's not so. Listen, pay close attention. They mean your benefit, and therefore, if you want to stay away from trouble, you better listen to them. Emet keneh ve'al timkor chokhmah u'musar u'vinah. Loosely translated, buy truth and do not sell, wisdom, discipline, and understanding. Buy. Why does it say to buy the chokhmah? Because in case you do not have it for free, this class is for free. In case you don't have a class for free, we spoke about the value of emet and chokhmah. Keneh, acquire it even if it means spending money on it. It's for your benefit. Wouldn't you want to buy something if it was for your benefit? If it's for your benefit, it's worth it. It's worth your money. Emet keneh, therefore go ahead and buy it if you need to, if it's not free. Make an effort to acquire it. Ve'al timkor. Now this is very interesting. Ve'al timkor is talking about the one who's giving the class. Don't sell it for money. Torah is not meant to be something that people should sell. Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kilat Yaakov, it belongs to the entire Jewish nation. Those who have it should not just keep it for themselves, should not sell it, should share it with others. Rabbis tell us that this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. Ma ani bechinam, af atem tiyu bechinam. Just like I am free, I give it to you for free, you should also be for free. So what right do teachers and rabbis have to charge or to have a salary? The only right they have is what's called sechar batala. We're paying them for not doing something else. If they would not be paid for teaching, they would be doing something else. They'd be working in real estate, they'd be lawyers or doctors perhaps. So that's called sechar batala. We're paying them for abstaining, from not being occupied in other areas, so that they can teach, so that they can give over the tradition to the next generation. If that's the case, we have to support them. Otherwise, they're entitled to do something to support themselves. That's okay. Reasonable amount of what they would be getting if they were to do something else. But otherwise, the chokhmah or the Torah is not something to be sold. It's not a business. Emet k'neh v'al timkor, another idea behind the words of al timkor, don't sell it. Just don't sell it or exchange it for anything else. Somebody may want to buy something or sell something. At the same hour, he has a shiur. The shiur comes first. Just because you're about to make some money, just because there's a deal waiting for you, don't sell the chokhmah, don't sell the emet, the truth, for just anything. It's not an even exchange. Chokhmah u'musar u'vina. Next pasuk, Gil yagil avi tzadik yoled chacham v'yismach. The father of a righteous son will rejoice greatly, and he who begets a wise son will have joy with him. In this pasuk, he mentions two characteristics of a young man, one who has made himself righteous, and one who is a chacham. If you look at the pasuk, you will notice how he says, the father of a tzaddik, yoled chacham, the one who begot, who gave birth to a chacham. There's a big difference here between the chacham and the tzaddik. A tzaddik is not born a tzaddik. A tzaddik, a righteous man, you make of yourself. We have free will, and the free will allow us to make of ourselves either righteous people, good people, or bad or evil people. Regardless of who one's father or mother was, regardless of even what one's education was. It helps to have a good education, it helps to have good parents, it helps to have good environment and good friends, because they all contribute in molding our personality and influencing and giving us the right values. But we ultimately have the last say, the last word, what we want to make of ourselves. Hitler, Machshemot, chose his way, right? George Washington chose his way, Thomas Jefferson chose his way. Each man, each individual chose what they make of themselves. Not their position, not their success as presidents or as leaders, but what they made of themselves. What they did not choose is if they were chachamim, intelligent people. A chacham or a tipesh, a fool, is determined by one's mazal. And that's very interesting to some people. Yes, believe it or not, you have, as parents or as individuals, you have no say as to what kind of an IQ you're going to have. That has been determined by the mazal one is born into. As the rabbis tell us in the Gemara, Tipa zu mateheh alea, when the angel asks Hashem, what will be on this drop? What will be about this neshama? What kind of a destiny will he have? Will he be smart or a fool? That is one of the questions. Tzaddik or Rasha, they do not ask, because otherwise we're robots, and we're not robots. In other words, the free will determine, how we exercise our free will determine whether we're tzaddikim or rashaim. That is how one is judged. They will not judge you for how smart you were. How much knowledge you acquired, of course, is helpful, because that will enable you to have a better life, perhaps, an easier life. You will have better guidance. But how much of a chacham an individual really is, other than acquiring the knowledge, which is just knowledge, it's not intelligence. There's a difference between not being knowledgeable and being intelligent. Knowledgeable is one who acquires knowledge. Obviously, he has to do that. He has to read, learn, go to classes. I'm talking about someone who's intelligent, who has a good head. He has a good memory. That has nothing to do with his free will. It mostly has to do with his mazal. That is why here Shlomo Melech talks about the two examples. Regardless of whether the child is a tzaddik or a chacham, it will gladden, it will bring joy to the father. Gil yagil avi tzaddik v'yoled chacham v'yismach. One who gave birth to a chacham makes him happy. We know this, we've read it before, and the emphasis here is as follows. Shlomo Melech reminds the parent that when your child becomes a tzaddik and a true chacham, that will bring you the most happiness in the world. If your child gets a PhD, makes $1 million a year, that may make the parents somewhat happy too, that they see that their son is a success. Some parents are very happy if their son has gotten an Oscar. And you know what? I don't even know what an Oscar is, but I hear it all these days right now. So that's why I know. I know it has something to do with the movies. And it has something to do with being a good actor, I think. Or if the movie is a success, to me it's all shtuyot, nonsense. But nevertheless, it makes some people happy. Makes those who got the Oscar and the parents happy. But does that happiness last forever? No. Once the parent passes away from this world, does he care about these things? Obviously not. They're meaningless. Shlomo Melech reminds us that even after they depart from this world, the parents are very, very happy and have a tremendous source of nachat, of satisfaction, to see a child who's going b'derech HaTorah, in the ways of the Torah. If he's a tzaddik, why? Because the child is a continuation, he's an extension of a parent. He is the only representative left in this world after a parent departs. And therefore the parents have certain responsibilities upstairs. The parents are sad if the child is not doing the right thing. It pains them. And they're judged for it if they would have been able to do something about it. You could have done something about it. So they're therefore definitely very concerned. Imagine a child not saying Kaddish for his parent. It makes no difference whether he knows or he does not know. We're not talking about if somebody is guilty of an offense or not. The fact is, if the Kaddish is not being said for the neshama upstairs, the neshama is really losing out. So it makes a big difference when a son is a tzaddik and chacham. It brings tremendous simcha to a father, to a mother too. And this is the ultimate simcha, much more than the joy one may have if the son makes money or has great honors. And as he continues on to the next pasuk, Yismach avicha v'imecha v'togel yolatecha. And as he translates it, may your father and mother rejoice, and may she who bore you have joy. Similar idea, that this is what really brings happiness to both parents. Parents may have certain concerns about sending their son to yeshiva, and many parents, of course, were very upset when they found out that their child is going to yeshiva. If they only knew what this would do for them. As a story that I told you last week, whoever was here last week, with Hurkenos and his son Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer did not want to join his brothers in working and tilling the fields, and they were very upset at him, the brothers. And the father, they wanted to excommunicate him from the inheritance, that he should have none of the money that their father had, and he was a very, very wealthy man. But Hurkenos traveled to Yerushalayim, and he saw in this big assembly many famous people and great rabbis, and all of a sudden, of all people, he sees his son, who's been away for a while, get up and speak before this whole important crowd, giving a shiur. Do you know what pride that gave him? What simcha? Not realizing what his son was able to accomplish in such a short time. The greatest source of nachat and of simcha comes about when the child grows to become a big tzaddik and a talmid chacham. He's reminding the parents too. Don't give up on that. Don't think that you will be happier to see your son just as a successful lawyer. Not necessarily. If he has the ability, not all of them do, but if this child has the ability to grow in Torah and Yirah, then it's worth your investment to send him to a good yeshiva. This will bring you the greatest happiness of all. In talking about Chacham, even though he's extolled Chokhmah very, very much, here he associates Chokhmah with Tzaddik for another important reason. There's no such a thing as Chokhmah having any value without the child being a righteous person too. A person may become very knowledgeable, but if he's not righteous, if he's not a good-mannered person, what is this all Chokhmah all about? It's like he says elsewhere, Nezem Zahav Be'af Chazir, it's like having a golden ring in the snout of a pig, right? The Nezem Zahav, the golden ring, is beautiful, it's precious, but where is it? It's in the nose of a pig. If the guy is not a mensch, like we say in Yiddish, then what good is it, all the chokhmah that he has? So the true value of chacham is if it's together with a tzaddik. True value of chokhmah is only when one practices what he preaches. So the chokhmah teaches us a lot of things. When one learns chokhmah, it teaches us a lot of things. But do you apply what you just learned? Just to know something has no value. To know it and to apply it, then it has value. So whenever he says chacham, we have to be sure we understand what he means. It's not just knowing the information, it is applying it. A lot of Jews know a lot about Judaism, but they don't apply it. Judaism, as I've said many times, is not a religion in the heart. It requires ma'asim, it requires deeds to prove your sincerity, to prove what you believe in. And that requires many, many deeds, daily deeds. Pasuk Chavav, Tna beni libecha li ve'einecha derechai titzorna. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes keep my ways. After he told us about chokhmah and how he warned us about certain habits, now he's about to begin telling us the pitfalls and the dangers of some of the traps that are out there. And before he does that, he gives us a quick reminder. Pay close attention. Tina beni libecha li is another way of saying, pay close attention. Give me your heart to what I'm about to say. Pay close attention to it, because there are traps out there, and I want you to be able to recognize these traps and to avoid them. Because if you are not aware of them, you can easily fall into them. So again, he's reminding us that one who is not a chacham, one who has not learned Torah, may make a mistake in believing naively that something is okay at first, until it's too late. So that's why he says, pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you. I'm going to give you some examples of some of those traps that are out there. He says one of the most dangerous traps, perhaps before we get to what those traps are, he uses the word here, libecha ve'einecha. In other words, give me your heart and let your eyes keep my ways. The reason why he uses here the words heart and eyes is because of what the rabbis tell us. העיניים והלב הם שני סרסורי חטא שיש לו לאדם. Man always has two agents of sin with him. These are the two agents of sin, the eyes and the heart. It is because of them that one usually comes to sin. That is why in the Kriyat Shema you find lo taturu acharei levavchem ve'acharei einechem. Be careful not to go after what your eyes see and what your heart desires. That's why he's saying, pay close attention, but he's also putting an emphasis on the heart and the eyes, because these are two agents of sin that require extra hashgacha, extra supervision. They can cause one tremendous amount of trouble. And some of that trouble, perhaps one of the most serious sources of trouble, Pasuk Chav Zayin, Kishucha amuka zona uve'er tzara nochriya. For a harlot is like a deep ditch, and a strange or foreign woman like a narrow well. Everybody here understand what a harlot is? H-A-R-L-O-T? A prostitute. Yeah. What's the difference in English between a prostitute and a harlot? I don't know. But I don't think it's important for us to know, because we all understand it's the same idea. There's various synonyms to describe the same type of individual who sells herself, basically. But I just thought of an idea. Perhaps one of the differences could be as follows. A prostitute, you have to go find her. She doesn't just go finding you. And a harlot is lower. She is the one that's, because based on what he's about to say, it fits more into that description. She's the one that may go after the man in trying to seduce him. So that's even worse than a prostitute, which you just, people pay, for the services that are forbidden. So kishucha amuka zona ube'er tzara nochriya. As he translates it over here, the harlot is like a deep ditch, and a foreign woman, in reality, the foreign woman is not a good translation. He means a nochriya, he means a goya. A Gentile woman is like a be'er tzara. It's like a narrow well. A narrow well and a ditch. What do the two have in common? If you fall into them, it's going to be very hard to get out of them. These two, zonot and goyot, prostitutes, harlots, and the like, etc. And non-Jewish women who basically many times do not have the morals, the values, the decency to keep off, right? They go after you, they try to seduce you, and as a result of that, many Jews, not just human beings, men, but especially, unfortunately, Jews, and that's what we're concerned about here, have fallen into this trap in the past, in the present, and unfortunately in the future. In other words, Shlomo Melech is aware of human nature, and he's telling us that this is a big trap, and if you're not careful, then it will be very difficult once one has fallen into this shuha amuka, into this deep ditch, or this narrow well, to get out of it. This is a trap that people who are in it, very difficult for them to liberate themselves from it. Those who are stuck with the goya are pretty much stuck. It's still possible to get out of it, but it's hard. Those who go after zonot, of course it's possible to let go, but it's difficult. And why is it so difficult? It's not just a habit, it's not just a ta'ava, it's because of the next pasuk, which is why I explained that harlot may be somewhat different than a prostitute. The next pasuk explains the actions of the harlot. She too will suddenly lurk. To lurk means to ambush, to try to find a korban, a victim. So she too will suddenly lurk, and she will increase the faithless among men. So what does this harlot do? She goes after the men. And as a result of going after the men, uvogedim be'adam tosif, and she will increase the faithless among men. Faithless. Faithfulness or lack of faithfulness is something, of course, that is heard about when we're talking about a relationship. If the two are faithful to each other or not faithful, chas v'shalom. And here Shlomo Melech tells us something interesting, that she is able to increase bogedim. In other words, the faithless amongst men. So the commentaries explain that what she does is that she's even able to trap those who have no interest on their own, because they're married. They have their own wives. They're happy too. Happy marriages. No, a woman like this who's a harlot is able to ubogedim ba'adam tosif. She can increase even those who have been faithful all along. She can make them faithless. That is how dangerous this type of a ta'ava, of a trap is. And it happens, and I don't think I'm saying any hidush over here to you, anything new, but just putting it in the right perspective for greater emphasis, that this is something very dangerous. And before we've spoken about how serious of a sin it is, how if one does not do proper teshuvah, what this eventually causes him, not only in this world, but in the world to come. But here he talks a little bit about just how this trap is so dangerous, how she lays it out, how she goes after. It's not something that you go looking for, which is bad enough. People go looking for the wrong things. But here you have to be aware of her motives. I was yesterday in Miami, and all of a sudden a non-Jewish woman, wants to ask me a question. And questions, of course, about religion. And then she sticks out her hand to me. Would you shake my hand? I says, no. And of course she was insulted, and she asked me, well, don't you think it's insulting? I said, well, don't you think it's insulting to me if I shake your hand? I mean, it's a two-way. How do you acknowledge somebody? He says, just like the Japanese do, we bow our heads. Now, why did I say that? It's not true. It's not true, but it is true. If you want to acknowledge, you can be Japanese for a moment or two, right? And I got into a whole conversation with her. Do you know what a handshake is? No, she says, I don't know what a handshake is. I just think you're being cold and being not nice to women. She says, do you know that I am married? And my wife, and I show my wife there. You know what could happen if I shake your hand? And I go into explaining how one thing could lead to another. A handshake is a certain closeness. She said, no, I can hug this guy walking by you right now, she says. That's because you have Italian blood, I tell her. She told me before that she was Italian. I says, we don't do that. We reserve hugs and kisses for those who, individuals who we're very, very close to. Anyway, it went longer and longer until I told my wife to take over. I didn't want to continue talking. But before I leave, she tells me, I was only testing you, Rabbi. I was only testing you because I know all about you. I've worked in New York City with some Hasidic Jews. So I know that. I was just testing you. Could you still give me just a little pinky? I said, no, not even a pinky. So she was a little upset, but then she says, no, I was just testing you. She says, I still don't understand. Well, I told you don't understand. Maybe you should read about Judaism a little bit and understand that this is something very important to us. And that is why for over 3,000 years, we're still Jewish.
Is she Jewish?
No, she's Italian. Italian-American.
Could
No, of course. It has nothing to do with being Jewish or not, Anyway, I just figured I'd share that with you just to describe a situation where people who get too close eventually lose it. We have our limits, we have our constraints for a good reason.
The rabbis built the fences, Rabbi.
And the Torah. The rabbis added some additional fences, sure. But that's what Shlomo Melech is telling us over here, is that they go after you. And you know what? Initially, I thought that that's exactly what she was aiming for, maybe, even though it didn't make sense to me. But you never know what's going on in their mind, even though she says she was testing. There are ambushes out there. There are individuals who are out to get us, and we have to recognize those traps.
Rabbi, how do you explain what you said a few weeks ago that Jewish men minding their own business go to Hong Kong and there's goyot there? They're actually going to look for the goyot.
No, chas v'shalom.
That's what you were explaining.
Nobody goes usually to look for something like this, but human beings have yetzarim, and if they don't learn Torah regularly, they don't pray in a minyan, they don't surround themselves with kedusha, with holiness, then they can easily fall prey to all the tum'ah, to all the impure forces that are out there. One has to surround himself with a very high wall, not to allow the filth in the street to penetrate his home. Watching TV today is not like in the late 60s or early 70s when we had TV, and occasionally we saw on Sunday something which was not so immodest. But today people allow themselves to be exposed to certain sites on the internet or certain newspaper ads. Today just opening up the LA Times is pornographic. When you see the women the way they are dressed, even though all they're doing is trying to sell lingerie, you call it in English? Yeah. But it's not sanua, it's not modest.
But when you go to Hong Kong, everybody is not sanua there, Rabbi. In other words, nobody's dressing like they
Oh, no. In Hong Kong, actually, they are more sanua in certain places there. The Chinese, I think, in comparison, are much more sanua than, for example, some of the women walking down Venice Beach, right? So it's still, if somebody, of course, is by himself without his wife for a number of weeks, then even though the Chinese is only 4.5 feet tall, yeah, and over 250 pounds, the mind works in mysterious ways. They don't think too much about how attractive somebody is. The more so if that person is immodest and attractive and talks very nicely to the individual, then of course, you can fall. And that's what Shlomo Melech is telling us over here, is that there are individuals out there who will actually go looking for a victim. You have to recognize this trap.
Rabbi, in the same context, the convention you went to with people perhaps who are into marriage, where a Jewish man is married to a Goya,
right?
The man was trapped by the Goya, Rabbi. To some extent, he was trapped. Once he got into it, he can't get out. Like Shlomo Melech says, he got involved, and it's very hard to extricate himself from the trap. So now they're trying to maybe Megaya these women, but they're not. The men got involved with them, and they're trapped in this relationship. Maybe their kids involved.
Yeah, it's a trap, and it doesn't always, it doesn't always end up that one converts. We're talking about the best situation where the least damage is done, and that is that a mixed marriage couple, after one who's doing teshuvah, has a hard time leaving their relationship, especially if they have kids and they've been married for 20 years, and all of a sudden, they do teshuvah. What now? You still have some who will break up the marriage, especially when the other side is unwilling to change. They want to continue to be Catholic. But you also have a situation where the other one is so close to their spouse that they're willing to listen. They're willing to make slow changes, but changes. So that's the question, whether and how much we should encourage them to stay in this relationship, assuming that they will become converts. Sincere converts, we're talking about doing all the mitzvot. No compromises in that. Nevertheless, in the majority of intermarriages, it's not a successful relationship to begin with. And the difficulty of leaving a goya is not just the relationship, it's that it can become very expensive, for him, with attorneys and with trouble, all sorts of trouble. It's not just getting out of it, it's how one gets out of it. Sure. So anyway, so Shlomo tells us here that ubogdim ba'adam tosif, that this harlot increases the faithless. In other words, she can cause individuals who were faithful to become not faithful. But the simple meaning of bogdim involves a certain treason, begida, against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. When one goes with a goya, as I've explained it in the lecture about why not marry a goya, that Malachi says that one who does so is committing an act of treason against his God by marrying the daughter of a strange or foreign God. But el nechar, ki bagda Yehuda, as the pasuk says, for Yehuda has betrayed the covenant that we made with Hashem. So by joining forces, which is what an intimate relationship it really is, two people join forces and they become one, it's an act of treason against Hashem, whether it's a marriage or just an intimate act of desecrating the Brit Milah and misusing it. Lemi oy, lemi avoy, lemi midyanim. Who cries woe, or alas, he translates it. Oy va'avoy is a term which is difficult to translate in English, but he says woe or alas. He who has quarrels, he who talks too much, who has wounds without cause, who has bloodshot eyes. That's the continuation of the pasuk. Lemi siach, lemi petzaim, hinam, lemi hachlilut einayim. That's the continuation. Now he's going back to the drunkard. To who is woe, to who is alas, in other words, who are the ones that cry out in the end? Those who are drunk. And the reason is because being drunk leads to fights, it leads to znut, prostitution, it leads to anger, it leads to lashon hara. Because a person who becomes drunk loses control of himself, and as a result of losing control, it leads him to all sorts of problems. And the commentaries divide up this pasuk in various parts, the various consequences that result from a person drinking too much. Lemi oy, oy is referring to the pain that one causes himself to his physical body. Avoy, the loss of money as a result of these habits. Lemi midanim or midyanim, to who are the fights that one will have with his spouse as a result of the drinking. So we're talking about his physical body suffering, his money suffering, his relationship, his marriage suffering. And lemi siach, we're talking about the reputation that he will have, the scandal that he will cause, what people will say about him. It's a siach, people will talk about him. And then there's the petzaim hinam, and the wounds that he has brought upon himself because of what? Lemi hachlilut einayim, to he who has drunk himself, in other words, who has become drunk. And even though he's asking these questions in this pasuk, the teshuvah, the answer to this is in the following pasuk. Lame'acharim al hayayin labaim lachkor mimsach. These are difficult words, but what he means is here, those who sit late over wine, those who come to search for mixed wine. Those that basically drink themselves I think the expression says drinking themselves to death. Those who overdrink themselves. Now what will happen? Why is drinking so harmful? Why does it cause all these troubles? So he explains like this. The reason why drinking brings or causes so much trouble is al tere yain ki it adam ki iten bakos eno yithalech b'mesharim. Do not look at wine when it is red. When he puts his eye on the cup, it goes smoothly. Well, that's not exactly what the commentaries say. The commentaries explain this pasuk to mean as follows: that when one sees the wine, he sees the redness, he sees the mellowness, how sweet it is. And therefore, yitalech b'misharim, what this wine eventually causes him to do is that he thinks that he's always walking on a straight path, where in fact he's walking crooked. He loses his sense of direction, and he's no longer able to distinguish. In other words, the harmful effects of becoming high, becoming drunk, is that he thinks he's going the right way, where in fact we know not only the accidents that occur with drunken drivers, but of how they lose control of themselves at home and they hit others without even realizing what they're doing. They have a complete loss of their senses. Why don't they know that what they're doing is wrong and no good? I mean, after all, if you drink a cup of wine, nothing happens. And that's exactly it. He says, the reason why they don't know at first is because ultimately, it will bite like a serpent and sting like a viper. Why? Because these stings of a serpent or a viper, at first you don't feel the pain. You get a sting, you get a bite, and before you know it, after a few minutes, now it really hurts. Now it starts to hurt. Then the venom spreads, and then it kills. And that's what happens exactly to a drunkard. He at first does not realize it, does not know it. This is a trap. It's a simple trap that one is setting himself by drinking. And unfortunately, people do not realize it. And after a while, even though they become sober again, they go back to it. Now let me ask you this question. A person who has become sober, doesn't he now realize what went through him? Why do people have a problem with alcoholism? Well, I've talked about this in the past. I saw Dr. Twersky write a whole article about people who have become alcoholics. What is that? Right. And how he has dealt with them. As you know, they have there's various organizations that help these people. People who may otherwise be good people, who've fallen into this habit and cannot get themselves out of it. And he says that basically the way a psychologist understands it is, even though this man sees the harmful effects, he sees, does not necessarily agree with it, he sees the harmful effects, and he has repeated this time after time, he still cannot control it, he still does not really show an interest in ridding himself of this, even though it may be at the expense of his relationship, his marriage, his house, his work, what's going on? And he says it's called three things, three stages that they all go through. 1, denial. 2, rationalization. And 3, compulsion. In other words, these individuals have a problem with denial at first. They deny that a problem exists. When you prove it to them that there is a problem, your wife wants to divorce you. They rationalize. They begin to rationalize why it's not such a problem. You know, that they have the problem, that he doesn't have. Once you've already proved it to them, now they can deny it. So they begin to rationalize it. And of course, even though they've rationalized it, and they see the harmful effects, why can't they get out of it? Even if you beg them? Because there's compulsion. The third element here. The compulsion of wanting more and more, repeating it time after time. People can make the same mistake and repeat it. Yes?
Isn't it also the compulsion to block out the rationalization? To use it to block out the other one?
Yes, it definitely could be, depending on what the problem is. Even though we've spoken about alcoholism, Dr. Twersky says you can apply these processes or these stages to just about any other habit that a person may have, and who does not have an interest in kicking that habit. When he sees the effects of it, when he has a sober moment, and therefore he's able to rationalize that before he gets into the compulsion. So therefore rationalization usually is before compulsion, because he may have a moment or two where he may, think again and decide whether he should change his ways or not. But he says, no. There's no problem here. Even though you showed him, you proved it to him, he begins to rationalize it. So at that moment, maybe there's no compulsion, but you're right in a sense, because perhaps part of the compulsion is forcing him to rationalize. It's possible, sure.
In the rationalization, you do yourself wrong, and then he's compelled to drink another beer to drown it out.
Yeah, that's also possible. Yeah. Anyway, so that's, it's like, yes.
What creates these timers in the first place, Rabbi? To get these people, it could be gambling, it could be zoners. What causes the...
Well, every human being has certain weaknesses. Some people have more than others. But what we talked about over here are not necessarily weaknesses that began with an individual that he went looking for them. They came to him, like with the zonot. You know, it may have come to him. He may have been a good person, and he fell because these are traps that are laid out there. But sometimes, of course, people look for certain things, and that is why he gave us the introduction of the eyes and the heart. You got to watch them because they will mislead you. They are agents of sin. And you got to be extra careful and watchful of them. So anyway, so the last few pesukim of the Perek deal with explaining the actions of this drunk man, of how he at first does not realize the damage, because it's like the bite of a serpent. And the next pasuk is Einecha yir'u zarot v'libecha yidaber tapuchot. Your eyes will see strange women, and your heart will speak confusedly. In other words, the eyes will tend to go and see these things that are forbidden, as we said before, and your heart, yidaber tapuchot, will speak confusedly. By being drunk, you will not know what you're talking about. You will say things that you eventually will regret. In other words, the wine and all these ta'avot bring a person to think about certain things, and leharher, to think, is also forbidden. And it goes against the mind. That's why he calls them tapuchot. It goes against a sane mind, a healthy mind, would not think about these things. But when a person has no control, he does and says things that he would not otherwise do. The next pasuk goes on to say, "Vaya keshochev belev yam ukeshochev berosh chibel," and you shall be like one lying in the midst of the sea, and like one lying at the top of a mast of a ship. In other words, you will not realize what's going on in your surroundings. It's just a description of how one completely loses control and is not aware of his surroundings, of what is exactly happening to him. Hikuni bal chaliti, halamuni bal yadati, matayakitz osif avaksheno od. They struck me, but I did not become ill. They beat me, but I did not know it. When will I awaken? I will continue. I will seek it again. A description of a drunk man who does it again, who repeats it, doesn't realize at first that it has happened to him. He eventually sees that it's not so bad. After all, I mean, he didn't get injured. He didn't get sick. Because of the tremendous yitzhak that he has, he doesn't pay attention to the real damage that is happening. And what's the real damage? That he has an addiction here. That in itself is damage already. He's already hurt. He loses his sense of pain because he doesn't feel anything. And this is all an example of the yetzer, and an example of all the ta'avot that can run wild, in other words, in a person who loses control. Just want to finish with yeah. Exactly. He's not sensitive to others, to himself. And all he does pretty much at the end of the Perek is describe to us the symptoms of a drunk man, how he loses control, therefore he has no mind, doesn't even realize that what he's doing is wrong, sees the damage and doesn't realize that it's really damaging, and that's because of what I said before in the name of Robert Twersky, because there's a certain rationalization, there's a certain compulsion, and of course at first there's complete denial. Yes?
How do you advise parents, Rabbi, with Chag Purim Sameach coming up, that not to let the kids go?
Yeah, well, since Purim is coming up, that's a good point. In Purim we have to be happy, we have to drink more than the usual, but only during the Seudah, only during the meal. Don't drink while you're taking Mishlei Manot to people, and for sure don't drink while you're driving, right? Don't overdrink in other people's home because you don't want to vomit on their carpet or on their sofa, So if you want to drink in your home, and don't mix wine and liquor. In other words, be sensible, and of course have other people around you watching you that you don't overdo it. Purim is not a time to lose complete control over yourself. It's not a time to loosen oneself to the extent of just, drinking as much as you want. There's a limit to that too. You're supposed to be happy. And people should know how much wine it takes for them to be happy. to be very happy that you can fall asleep from drinking, but not that you lose complete control. It is a mitzvah to drink more than the usual, so that you should become a little higher than we usually are. And just be careful not to drive after that. Yeah. I just want to finish with a point. What Shlomo Melech is telling us, he's not just describing the symptoms of a drunk person, but he really is reminding us that these individuals, especially the drunk man, or the one who becomes a drug addict, not so much prostitution, even though that's a whole different problem. Why talk so much about a drunk? Why drunk? Why? I mean, was it such a big problem in his days? But perhaps what is happening with the drunk person, the reason why it's so dangerous and why it's so sad, is because really what this man is doing, why is he drinking? Why does the man take drugs? Anybody know? To escape from? From reality, exactly. Very simple. To escape from reality, to soothe one's pain, in thinking that that is a solution. It's an escape. There is no such thing as an escape. Chaz v'shalom, suicide is not an escape. Drugs is not an escape. No, gambling is a whole different deal. It is just a momentary illusion, that there are no worries and there is no pain, and therefore he feels good momentarily. So the drunk man does continue to do what he's doing, does repeat, does have compulsion, partly not because it's just addicted, partly because he has seen some benefit from what he has done. Despite all the damage, he has seen some benefit. And what was that benefit? The benefit that he has escaped for an hour, for a half an hour, for a day, for whatever, his problems. But guess what? The next day he still has it. It's the same. So obviously what is happening to this man, he's not using his head. He's not using his cup. And the reason why he's not using his cup, his head, because there's no chokhmah there. So it's empty. If it's empty, a person cannot live in a vacuum. Then he will automatically follow what his heart desires. When a person has learned chokhmah and he makes a decision to apply that chokhmah, then hopefully the chokhmah will be the captain of the ship and not the heart.
Chokhmah is,
yeah.
comes from koach, memtei.
Yeah. Moach, the brain. Adam, yeah.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
But how come, Rabbi, we heard the rabbis use the expression,
Yeah.
the shikar is a goy. Jewish men...
Right, Jewish men usually don't drink,
Right.
right.
Why was
That is why I've said before that a lot of what he's saying can be applied to just about any ta'ava, as far as at least the compulsion is concerned. That becomes addictive, and then some of them it becomes very difficult to get out of. So if one prepares himself with chokhmah, then hopefully he will be able to become aware of those pitfalls, of those dangers that lie out there, and stay away from them. B'ezrat Hashem. Chag Purim Mesameach to all of you, and don't overdo it. Just be happy and enjoy Purim.